Hi guys, this is the start of part 2 of The Fever, chapters 5 to 8. I hope you enjoyed the first part and you saw some of my friends reading it with me. Hope you enjoy this one too.
Chapter 5. Romance was in the air. Spending so much time together, Heinz and Jean were closer than ever before. They would stay up late talking about their next big idea and how they could make the world a better place. Jean was so passionate about her work, it was her life's purpose. Heinz would spend hours just listening to her every word, memorising everything she said. He was love-struck. She made him feel like $1,000,000. He adored her. Her short brown curly hair, her misty grey eyes, but most of all, her contagious laugh, which never failed to make him smile. But alas, his love was lost on her. She had fallen for somebody else. Q. When he entered a room, his presence gave her butterflies. She couldn't help but hang on his every word, stare longing into his wide, piercing eyes, and be enchanted by his whimsical moustache. At least 4 times a week he would appear and sweep her off her feet. Sometimes they would disappear for days on end, leaving Heinz both jealous and alone. However, every time she returned, Heinz welcomed her with open arms, his heart melting at the sight of her. He was in love and there was nothing he could do, except trying to grow a moustache, which wasn't going very well. Then, all of a sudden, it stopped. Q stopped visiting. It had obviously left a scar on Jean. She was never the same again. She seemed to age very quickly, her hair turning almost all as grey as her eyes. Her frail body was a shadow of her former self. No longer the athlete she once was. Now her intellect was failing too. However, Heinz was there to look after her as he had been from the start. He hadn't aged well either. His slim physique was now rather porky and his thick brown hair had begun to bald on top, revealing loads of previously hidden freckles. But he never lost his eyes. They were still as blue as the ocean itself. Heinz spent the rest of his time looking after Jean. He did test after test to find out what was wrong, until he got the answer he did not want to find. She had the fever. The fever was a terrible disease. No one knew where it had come from or how it was cured. What they did know is that it would suck the life force out of anyone who caught it. Everything that made you you would be drained away until you were just a cell of your former self. Heinz worked day and night trying to find a cure. He used his talents as a biochemist to help him, mixing and creating amazing concoctions which he hoped would cure Jean. But as the days passed and the nights grew darker, Jean began to get sicker. She was now so weak Heinz had to feed her, which was often cold baked beans, of course. One day, Heinz was reading her favourite book to her, Theory of and Application of Digital Signal Processing by Lawrence Rabner. Jean reached out her frail, bony arm to get his attention. "What is it, Jean? Am I pronouncing some of the terminology wrong?" he asked, sympathetically kneeling down beside her and gently caressing her tender hand. "The sunset," she stuttered, struggling to get her words out. "One more time. I'd like to see it." As quickly and carefully as he could, Heinz picked Jean up and gently placed her in her wheelchair. Using all his strength, he pushed the rickety old wheelchair out of the lab. Jean was getting tired and her eyelids were heavy. Her grey curly hair fluttered gracefully in the wind as Heinz pushed her to the top of the hill. The view was breathtaking. You could see the entire city alight with the crimson glow of the sun. Once again, Jean reached out her slender, wrinkled hands towards Heinz. He knelt beside her, the westerly breeze dancing through his freshly grown moustache. Thank you for everything," she exhaled, squeezing his hands with whatever strength she had left. "I never treated you right. You were always there for me, but I never saw you." Heinz stroked her hand lovingly. It's okay, he reassured her, his eyes welling up. We're together now. I love you, Heinz. I always have. I just never knew. As his final words left her mouth, her hand slipped from his. The sun had set now, and Jean had gone. I love you too, he whispered into the darkness.
Chapter number 6 already. You're halfway through. I hope you've spotted some of my friends help me read this story. Chapter number 6 is called The Antidote. That's where we find ourselves now, on top of that same hill, 1 year later. The crimson sunset still rolling over the horizon, the westerly breeze still blowing. That silhouetted man? Yes, it's Heinz, just 1 year older, briskly walking down the hill. This time, failure was not an option. You see, Heinz had continued to work hard on the antidote, the memory of Jean still burning in the forefront of his mind. The time under the wide, watchful eyes of Q. This time under the wide, watchful eyes of Q. Ever since Jean's death, he was always in the lab, either stood at the top of the cold metal staircase or shut away in his secretive office. Heinz often wondered, why? Did he miss Jean? Did he want to be involved with what she loved? Or was he just overseeing Heinz's work like the boss should do? Anyway, he was always there, always curious of Heinz's progress. Hours turned to days. Days melted into weeks. Harder and harder Heinz worked under Q's watchful eye. Blood, sweat, and tears were shed for his work, but it was all for Jean. I won't fail you again, he would whisper to himself. All the while, Q watched intently from his office, twizzling his whimsical moustache. But finally, Eureka! Exploded Heinz. I've done it! The antidote! This is it! He sprung around like a child in a sweet shop. That was until he saw Q emerge from his lair. With a swift movement, he snatched the antidote from Heinz's hands. So, this is it, he sneered, eyes wider than usual. His eyes were almost dancing off his face, and he glared longingly at the small crystal blue vial. And this is the only one? Yes, Heinz replied cautiously, half happy in his discovery, half confused at Q's reaction. Good. Q handed him an envelope which read, opened at 6:33 p.m. Wednesday 25th of March 2020, and not a second before. Q. Burn it once you've read it, Q demanded, finally peeling his eyes from the vial. I want you here once you've read it. But why? Heinz queried. Pooh HQ have discovered a plot to infect the entire world with the fever. The fever. Heinz's mouth dropped to the floor like his teeth weighed a ton. I must make more then, he stuttered, trying to prepare the antidote's ingredients. No, Q bellowed in an authoritarian tone. Heinz froze. We must separate you from the antidote. If you are in different places, We have a backup if one of you is destroyed. I've dabbled in biochemistry, and I can recreate the antidote. What I need you to do now is know you're safe. It's what Jean would have wanted. Just like that. Heinz's thoughts went to Jean. There was no way she would want him to get hurt, especially if he had the potential to save the world, to change it for the better, just like she had always wanted. So he agreed and left the lab, envelope in hand. Heinz, remember, Q said, patting him on the shoulder. Don't speak to anyone about this. There are eyes and ears everywhere. Heinz kept the envelope for 6 whole months without even a peek inside. He didn't want to let the bad guys win. He didn't want... but most of all, he didn't want to disappoint Jean. What do you think is going to happen next? This is exciting. Let's see who's going to be reading chapter 7.
Chapter 7. The Laboratory. The heavens had opened on Heinz's journey down the hill and towards the laboratory. Heavy raindrops fell like missiles through the air, exploding on impact. Water droplets raced around the circumference of his head, using his hairline as a racecourse and where his moustache met his nose as the finishing line. As he arrived at the lab, he was soaked through to the skin. He lifted his hair arm to knock on the large metal door, but suddenly it slid open. It was Q. He was wearing a dark purple suit beneath a white plastic apron, thick black rubber gloves and a pair of clear goggles over his wide, piercing eyes. "You're late," he panted. "They found us and they're almost here." Before Heinz could even think of a reply, he was dragged in and the door was slammed behind him. Still shocked by the sudden jolt through the door, Heinz steadied himself. He looked around the room. It was different how he remembered it. Tables and lab equipment had been replaced by a large machine in the centre of the room. Mounted on 4 large metal legs that were clamped to the floor, it looked sort of like a sci-fi cannon pointing at the ceiling. At the top of the humongous machine was a section that looked slightly like an umbrella, and it flashed red and green. There was a small keyboard at the base, which Q was stood at typing furiously. "Quick!" Q shouted, gesturing for him to come over. "I need your help." "What is this thing?" Heinz asked as he wandered hastily towards Q. This is Jean's greatest invention. It's her legacy. It's able to spread particles across the world simultaneously. We call it the distributor." Heinz stared in awe at the machine as the machine began to power up. Q grabbed Heinz by the tie and pulled him in close. Heinz could smell the fear on Q's breath. Q could smell the beans on his. "You have to focus now, Heinz. They already released the virus. It's in the rain, Heinz. It's in the rain." Heinz stood perfectly still. What did he mean? What virus? Who had released it? "The fever," Heinz questioned, snapping back into the real world. "What do you mean it's in the rain?" "Yes, the fever," Q shouted furiously. "They stole Jean's design. Everyone the rain touches will be infected with the disease. Many lives are at risk. We need to hurry." Heinz couldn't believe what he was hearing. He looked down at the rain-drenched clothes and gulped deeply. Had he been infected too? "The antidote! The antidote! I need the antidote!" Heinz begged, clawing at Q's purple suit. Slap. Q slapped Heinz across the face, leaving a bright red mark on his cheek. "Don't be so selfish! Don't be so stupid," Q ranted at him. "There are millions, no, billions of people around the world who need this antidote, and we can give it to them. Think how proud Jean would be. Oh, Jean, the reason he was here. He couldn't fail her again. Hines blinked hard, shook himself and eagerly stared at Q. What do you need me to do? He said confidently, Jean's memory fixed in his mind. Set the coordinates. This needs to cover the entire planet. You do that, I'll get the vial. As Hines turned towards the keyboard, Q darted off into the darkness, clunking up the metal staircase to his office. With his fingers moving faster than a cheetah's legs, Hines typed manically. Q had said that they had found them. He knew that they would be there soon. But when? He couldn't think about that now. All he had to do was type. Just a few more lines of code, he murmured to himself, fingers still moving frantically. Done. The coordinates were set. But where was Q? He should have been back by now. Hines flicked the switch to open the roof in anticipation for Q's return. Eagerly, the rain rushed like a tidal wave, drenching the entire lab. Where was he? Hines thought anxiously. Bam! Crash! Smash! Men in black body armour came hurtling through the windows and doors. They were all tall and slim, carrying terrifying-looking machines. Freeze! They shouted, aiming their weapons at Hines' plump, muffin-like body. Immediately, Hines threw his short, hairy arms up into the air. They were here. He was surrounding. The men circled him like a flock of ravenous vultures. That's affirmative, one of the men said sternly into his radio headset. We've got him, boss. Suddenly, Hines saw something move in the corner of his eye. It was moving quickly. From the darkness, Q appeared, running like his life depended on it. Unfortunately, the men in black spotted this too. They turned and began firing their weapons. Surprisingly, it wasn't bullets that were emerging from the barrels of the machine guns, but small black pellets. As they hit Q, they started to expand rapidly, sticking to any surface they touched. Q was hit, stuck to the ground by a multitude of those bubblegum-like splotches. Finish it, he groaned, while being engulfed by the pellets. He tossed the vial hard into the air towards Hines. As quick as lightning strike, he caught the vial and placed it into the distributor. This is for you, Jean, he muttered gently as he slammed his fist into the activation button. The machine came to life and the umbrella-like top shot up into the sky. Red, orange and yellow flames cascaded down from the machine as it rocketed into the sky. Poof! It exploded into the clouds, sending blue sparks across the sky. Hines slouched down with his back to the machine, a huge sigh of relief. Rain was still tumbling through the open roof. A short man wearing bright orange round glasses and an incredible bald head appeared in front of him. Do you even know what you've done? He stated sternly.
Chapter 8. The Bald-Headed Man. Saving the world from you. How could you harm so many innocent people? Hines thrashed as two men pinned him to the ground. Interesting, the man said curiously, scratching his bald, shiny head. And who is that man over there? He gestured to Q with his black leather-gloved hand. That's Q, the head of a secret spy agency called POO, and he's not going to let you get away with this. There will be spies surrounding this place as we speak, Hines interrupted passionately, staring down at whoever this evil, villainous man was. I'm sure they are, the man said calmly, reaching inside his coat pocket. This was it, Hines thought, dreading what he was going to pull out of his pocket. This is where it ends. At least I made Jean proud. He pushed himself to his knees and held his head up high. He closed his eyes. He didn't want to watch what was about to happen. 3, 2, 1. Ha 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 ha! Confused, Hines peeled open his eyes and glanced to where the neurotic laughter was coming from. To his shock and horror, it was coming from Q. He was being dragged up from the floor by 4 men, each carrying 1 limb. "I did it! I told you I could do it! No one can stop me!" he screamed erratically. Hines turned back towards the man, a look of bewilderment on his face. The man pulled a handkerchief out from his coat, wiped the specks of rain from his glasses, and put it back in his coat pocket. "I bet you're very confused," he said softly. He reached out his hand towards Hines. "Allow me to introduce myself. The name's Q. I'm head of the secret spy agency called Private Observation Operations. I think we need to talk." For a few seconds, Hines felt very faint. This can't be Q. He knows Q, and he's worked for him for years. Millions of unanswered questions filled his head, like a flurry of snow in a blizzard. But you can't be. That's Q there, the one in the purple suit with the moustache. Hines gestured towards the one he thought was Q. He wasn't so sure who to believe. The men holding him down had released his arms, and the new Q began to help him up. For such a small man, he was incredibly strong. "I'm sorry, son," new Q said, giving Hines a reassuring pat on the back. "That is Wilson Bucket, a notorious con man, and between you and me, a bit of a loon. We've been after him for years. Our surveillance team haven't had a clear location on him for over 25 years in a small coffee shop called Jet Cafe." The Jet Cafe? Hines thought anxiously. He remembered that was the first time he'd met Q. It was when Jean got that mysterious letter over 25 years ago. But why did he call himself Q? He asked, trying to understand the collapsing reality around him. "He's had a vendetta against the agency and I for a while," said the man who we are now assuming is the real Q. "It's a cover that no one will ever question. It explains a whole manner of strange habits and goings-on." "But why did he involve me? Or Jean? What did he want from us?" Hines asked, tears welling in his eyes, mind still shattered from the incredible truth that he had just discovered. "I don't know," Q replied, once again itching his bald head. "Let's ask him and find out."
I can't believe what's just happened. Let's see what happens next in part 3. Hopefully it'll be with you soon, guys. Enjoy.